Hey there, and welcome back to another Sony video. And recently, we saw the release of the latest trailer for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, due to release on the 2nd of June 2023. Now, when the first Spider-Verse film came out in 2018, I didn't know what to expect coming into it. It was a Marvel film, but under the Sony umbrella, and this was in the peak of the MCU, so I originally expected it would probably be a bit of a flop both critically and commercially, but yeah, I was pretty wrong in that regard. It grossed $375 million off a $90 million budget, and it got a really good critical reception, with praise for its story, its animation, design, music, pretty much everything if I'm going to be honest with you. And it's sitting pretty on 97% on Rotten Tomatoes, winning both the Golden Globe and the Oscar for Best Animated Picture, so yeah, not too shabby at all. And so in the aftermath of all that, I'm very much hyped for the release of this second film, and thus when the trailer came out, you better believe I was right there watching. And so today, that's what I want to do. Go through the trailer and see what's going on. So yeah, with all that being said, let's jump into it. Okay, just for some general thoughts to start off. For starters, the music and visual design is once again on point. I don't know what the hell it is, but there's just a certain sound that feels like Spider-Man. A way in which all of the films collectively are scored that immediately makes you think, oh yeah, that's a Spider-Man theme. And it goes into the video games as well. And once again, it feels like they've managed to capture that magic. And on top of that, I really love the visuals, this style of animation. It's so distinct and unique and tailor-made for that high-speed action that Spider-Man loves. It lends it a comic book and video game vibe, which gels really well with the characters and sets itself apart from the rest of the animation industry at large. I mean, hell, we're starting to see other studios start to replicate what they're doing here. Most notable in this, I think, is Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, especially in the action sequences. And good, honestly. I'm glad for a new visual style to break things up. It's very distinct and exciting and flamboyant. Variety is the spice of life after all. And then another major thing to note from the trailer was the emphasis on two major characters, besides Miles of course. First up we have his mum Rio. Now the first film had a look at his relationships with his father and his uncle, basically those father figure characters, and that was great, very wholesome, very emotional. And so now I hope we do get a little bit of time to flesh out the maternal side as well. A huge chunk of the trailer is overlaid with Rio's monologue to Miles, talking about how she can feel him pulling away from her as he gets older, and that she spent her whole life looking after him. And that now, though she realizes he needs to be his own man, she wants him to stay true to himself and look after her little boy for her. And honestly, it's such a wholesome little speech she gives him, and realistically, based on the title of the film, and the fact that he's likely going to be crossing worlds quite a fair bit, there's not going to be that much focus on that relationship, which is a shame, but I still hope it's touched on. And touched on in more than just one or two scenes. So many heroes have dead parents, but the interesting thing with Miles is they haven't done that to him, yet. Dead uncle, yes, but that's not quite the same. His parental figures, the major figures in his life, they're still alive. And so I don't want them to squander that chance to show a really powerful mother-son bond. And so now, let's move on to the other major character that features really heavily in the trailer. And this is of course Gwen Stacy. Now, it's been openly stated a number of times by the filmmakers that in the first film they did want to start the romance. But in the end, in the development phase, they found it too distracting, and it would work better going forward in a sequel if they got one. And now, we've arrived at said sequel, and they've openly said they're pulling the trigger, so I'm pretty hyped for that as well. I think exploring a lot of Miles' interpersonal relationships is going to be really interesting. And I'm kind of curious as to how they're going to deal with the whole alternate universe romance thing. I mean, talk about a long-distance relationship. But anyway, from what I can see, it seems like somebody's found a way for all the spider people to link up in a world between worlds where they can work together to defend the multiverse. And considering what happened in the first movie, at first, this did have me raising my eyebrows. I found it odd that Gwen could just appear there ready to take Miles into the multiverse after the high stakes of the previous film, but you know what? There's probably way more advanced spider-folk and worlds that have the technology to do this better than Fisk ever could, without almost exploding the multiverse, so I think I can suspend my disbelief. And I really love that shot of him and Gwen just standing there, having arrived in, well, I guess it's the Spider-Verse HQ. And then there's all the different spider people just standing around. It was actually quite exciting to see all the various different costumes and designs. And I know that almost all of them are just going to be background characters or maybe cameo roles with like one line or so, but still, just seeing all that variety, it gets me pretty hyped up. But then on the other hand, you don't really want them to cram too many of these cameos into the film, as the more characters you bring to the forefront, the more it draws away from the main story and the main characters. But yeah, honestly, there were so many, and all of them looked really cool, but my favourite was probably the Spider-Man who was wearing a paper bag on his head. Loved it. We then get a look at Peter B. Parker, who's doing a lot better than he was at the end of the first film. He's gotten his life in order, he's lost some weight, he's had a shower, he's shaved, and it seems he's reconnected with MJ and has then gone on to have a daughter named Mayday. Whew, terrible name in my opinion, but that's alright. Honestly, I'm just glad to get more of the character. His dry wit and his just general air of being completely and utterly done with the world was probably one of the highlights of the first film for me. Besides in Raimi's Spider-Man 2, I'd never really seen a washed up version of the character before, so it was really interesting and unique twist. And I'm curious to see how they integrate that version of the character into the film, retaining those elements of his personality that wouldn't make sense to get rid of, whilst also having him be far less washed up. Moving on, we get a look at this film's take on Jessica Drew, who looks pretty adequately badass. I'm really curious to see what direction they take her as well. Also, she's apparently pregnant in the film, so I wouldn't be surprised if they do a, "oh, my water broke" type of thing within the movie. Either as a completely serious thing where all the Spideys are panicking and don't know what to do, and they play it for laughs, or when she's talking to a villain, and they start to panic, and then she sucker punches them and reveals she was lying. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they actually do both of these things. Anyway, we see here she's in the midst of beating the shit out of the Vulture, who's looking a lot more comic bookish than we've seen in recent years. And so I'm guessing he's going to be the played for gags villain, somebody who can get beat up in the early confrontations to set the stage for the big clash at the end. At least, that's the vibe I'm getting from it. And then the next big moment in the trailer sees the proper debut of Miguel O'Hara, aka Spider-Man 2099, who looks to be a potential antagonist. Not sure if he's going to be the main villain or what his deal is really, but he strikes me as a for the greater good type of dude. Hence Gwen's questioning of whether they were supposed to be the good guys. Also, it looks like he might be in charge of running things in the Spider-Verse, as there are scenes of Miles running from what seems to be the entire Spider-Verse team, and then him and Miguel squaring up, with Miles coming out the worse for wear in that confrontation. So is he going to be the main villain? I'm thinking so. I think they're going to do a villain fake-out. Have him be an ally, but be a bit too brutal, too violent. Maybe in favour of killing people, who knows? And this is going to culminate in a clash of ideals between the Spider-Men at the end. And I'm actually really excited to see how that all plays out. Because honestly, this trailer, it was great. And I think the movie's going to follow suit. And considering the relative lack of downturn in quality from Pixar and Disney recently, I wouldn't be shocked if this thing gets the Oscar and Golden Globe again. Maybe that's a little too soon to say considering it's a very way off releasing, but still, I can't help being hyped. And so that's the end of the trailer and the end of the video. And I would like to say that these have just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of the trailer? You like it, hate it, think the movie's going to be good? Maybe it's going to be trash. I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.